Hello, everyone. It's me, David Chen. I'm here with Christopher Schnese and Stephen David Miller from the Spoiler Warning Podcast. We are here to talk about the movies we saw at Sundance Online 2025. Guys, let's start by talking about how many movies we actually ended up seeing this version of Sundance. I will say I watched 13 movies through Sundance's online portion this year, which I was pretty happy with. I wish it could have been more. I wish they'd had more days for us to watch stuff, but I was able to get through 13 movies. Stephen David Miller, how about you?
I managed to catch 22 movies at the festival this year, which was pretty tight over 4 days. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not
Wow.
positive that I like movies anymore, but I'm trying to keep a good attitude about them.
And Christopher Schnese, how many movies did you watch?
I did something I wouldn't recommend, which is just, completely took over the last 4 days of my life. And I saw 28 films and then 5 episodes of a television series. And my brain is fried now.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. Actually, I think you're still watching movies right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I had to pause just to come here.
I will tell you that I did. They actually made it very clear. They said the movies will stop at 11:59 p.m. Mountain Time on Sunday night, and I did hit play like 20 minutes before that happened because they said anything you hit play on before that happens, they will let you watch all the way through. So I did appreciate that. And my last movie was DJ Ahmet, which I thought was quite enjoyable. So anyway, we are going to talk about our three favorite movies this festival, and also one movie that may have disappointed us. So let's get into it. Christopher, why don't we start with you? You've watched the most movies out of any of us. Hit us up with one of your three favorite films of the 2025 Sundance Film Festival.
All right. Well, if I'm going first, I can just, immediately hit my for sure number one favorite film of the festival. And that was a film called Omaha, which is basically a story of a man getting his kids together, packing them into a car, and taking a little road trip off to Omaha, Nebraska. And it is a story where the kids wake up, they're being packed in the car. They don't exactly know what's going on. They just know they're going on a road trip. You're watching a man who's clearly down on his luck. It's a tough time for him. And you're sort of watching him try to take his kids towards something that you won't know for a while in this film. And you're just watching somebody trying their hardest to do what's right and kind of do right by their kids. And I found this just a beautiful, touching story that kind of just left me devastated by the end of it. And like when it ended, I knew that this was like far and away my favorite thing of the festival, and just a beautiful film, and really excited that I saw it.
It's a great choice, Omaha. Now, Stephen, you and I also saw Omaha, and I think we were not quite as taken with it. Here's what I'm going to say about Omaha. There's three central performances in this film. It's the dad and the two kids, and they are all awesome. Like, this is probably some of the best child acting I saw at Sundance overall. I think they have great chemistry. They're completely believable. So I was a fan of the performances of the film. Was not a fan of how the plot played out, and particularly I was not a fan of like how some of the components of the final act revealed themselves. But overall, there's a lot to like here. Stephen David Miller, what do you think?
Yeah, I was actually quite taken by Omaha. Like you mentioned, I have a few notes, mostly about, I would say, the very, very end of the film. But one reason I go to Sundance is to cry. It's what I want. It's what these kind of indie
Yes.
dramas do very well. And Omaha, more than any other film of the festival, gave me just that good, deep cry. And for that, because of the wonderful performances, the kind of naturalism of a parent with his kids, some of the most moving moments to me had nothing to do with drama. It's a conversation with the dad about whether he would rather eat poop or boogers. It's like little things that are just like very human of a parent trying their hardest.
Yeah.
And that carried me through any dramatic qualms that I had with this movie. So overall, I would still give it a strong recommend.
They nailed the naturalistic dialogue for this film, and also John Magaro, in my opinion, is going from strength to strength these days. For those who don't know, he was recently in The Agency on Paramount Plus. He was the husband in Past Lives, and I particularly appreciated him in September 5 or September 5th, however you want to call it. He's great in that film as well. He's become one of my favorite actors to watch, and he does do a good job in this movie. So Omaha, great choice for your I guess favorite film of Sundance Film Festival this year, Christopher Schnese. Stephen David Miller, let's talk about a movie you chose to highlight. Hit us up with something that you really liked.
All right, I am going to pick one that I think will be a little divisive among this audience, and that is a movie called Sorry Baby, the debut by Ava Victor, who is a comedian that I was unaware of before. Have you ever listened to Tig Notaro's stand-up special live, which she recorded it basically the night that she learned she had cancer? And it's this combination of heavy drama with complete deadpan humor, and the way it like mingled Tig Notaro's style with this really intense subject matter made it kind of beautiful and very human. And to me, Sorry Baby is probably the closest I've seen to that in movie form. It follows a grad student slash eventually professor named Agnes, who's working in a small East Coast town at a university. And for the first maybe 30 minutes, she's just living her life. She's a little bit eccentric, a bit quirky. She loves other people, but she has a very dry sense of humor. And then over time, the movie flashes back to show us things that may have informed how she became the person she is. And at certain points, I don't want to spoil it, but this movie becomes both very emotionally moving, I would say, and then also an incredibly dark, black comedic conversation about the response people have when you go through something difficult. Like, how are you supposed to be a person? How are you supposed to talk to other people about the difficulties that you've experienced? It's all kind of about the absurdity of living and going on moving in a world that does not make sense. And for me, I just found it completely charming and unlike anything else I've seen in a while. I think Ava Victor is a voice to be reckoned with for a long time.
Yeah, I think this is one of the this movie, Sorry Baby, at Sundance had a lot of buzz this year, kind of a quintessential Sundance movie, heralding the arrival of a bold new voice. Christopher Schnese, I'm curious, did you see this one and did you have thoughts on it?
Yeah, I did catch this one as well, and I'm a big fan of it. Tonally, it that sort of dry humor aspect of it didn't 100% work for me the entire time, but I think there are so many super interesting conversations around the topic that we're not saying, that the way it goes into it, and even the first person account of the events that take place in this film, the way it handles that and the thoughts behind what it means and what was it like to go through it and how other people see those conversations, I thought all of that was super, super compelling and really made this stand out as a film to see. But yeah, I totally was a little bit like all over the place with kind of the humor aspect of the story it was telling.
Well, Sorry Baby has been acquired by A24, and so you will probably be able to see it. I'm guessing sometime this year. We'll see. But one of the bigger films to come out of the festival, Sorry Baby, and it's one of Stephen David Miller's favorite movies from Sundance 2025. I will start by talking about, let's talk about The Perfect Neighbor. Now, one of my guilty pleasures is watching YouTube videos of police body cam footage. And I don't feel good about myself. I don't feel good admitting that I watch these videos sometimes. But there is something undeniably compelling about them. And this movie, The Perfect Neighbor, is a film composed primarily of police body cam footage. It's about a stand your ground law incident that happened, I think, in Florida. And what it does is it amasses tons of police body cam footage from a lot of different officers over an extremely long period of time, like many, many months, and assembles a narrative out of it. And it is highly engrossing. And you also feel this dread kind of building up throughout the movie because you know that things are heading towards a collision course in a way that is going to be very bad and explosive. And so, yeah, it's this kind of not only is it narratively and formally interesting, but it also illustrates how sometimes these laws can actually produce injustice. And so I found it to be quite engaging. I think Stephen David Miller, I know you saw it. Christopher Schnese, did you check out The Perfect Neighbor at Sundance this year?
I did not catch this one. This is one of the few that I didn't.
So Stephen David Miller, I think you actually recommended this to me. What'd you think of it?
I did. I thought the the filmmaking itself was just unbelievably intense. This was a very, very powerful documentary. I think as an experience, it is one of the most incredible things I saw at the festival. My only issue that I haven't grappled with yet is because we are watching with body cam footage a bunch of real people going through a increasingly difficult situation. I struggled with feeling, am I feeling voyeuristic here? Am I learning
Right.
something universal about America, or am I just gawking at the suffering of other people? And I started to have just a little bit of a voice in the back of my head of like, I was deeply moved by it, but I almost felt like I was so close, so intimate to these people going through difficult things.
Yeah.
I felt a little uncertain on my ethical involvement in it, but it's a mind-blowing experience.
It is a raw, visceral, gut-wrenching experience for sure, and you do feel like you are observing these people at one of the most private and intimate moments in their lives. Like multiple people I could be referring to with that statement. You know,
Yeah.
it's not just like one person. And so, yeah, there is this, you know, gross sense of voyeurism you get, and also the it does bring awareness to these laws. It does bring awareness to this case, which I had not heard of before. Not heard of this happening. If this was like a relatively well publicized case, and you can Google it, and like you can find the details of what happened in real life because it was relatively well known. And so I'm glad I know about it now, and I wouldn't have if it weren't for this film, The Perfect Neighbor. So for me, it was a net positive, but I totally understand the discomfort with it and respect it. So anyway, The Perfect Neighbor, a movie that I saw at Sundance 2025 that I thought was very engrossing. All right, Christopher Schnese, let's go back to you. What's another movie you saw at Sundance this year that you'd strongly recommend?
All right. Well, I'm going to talk again about the story of a father who's just trying to do right.
I'm going to tell you this, by the way. I had like a kind of hallucinatory out of body experience a couple times while watching movies during the festival, because there's literally multiple movies that had identical subplots.
Yes.
So there's like more than one film, for instance, where there was a child who had delayed speech. Like I literally watched a movie, their child had delayed speech, and then literally the next movie, another child had delayed speech. I was like, what is, what is with anyway, so it does kind of illustrate some of the tropes that some filmmakers tend to lean on for Sundance movies specifically. Sorry to interrupt, Christopher. Go ahead.
No worries. So this is another story about a father and a son. This time there's not two children, just one. But essentially it's an estranged father who has decided to, sell all his possessions and move to this remote island and sort of live out his life there. And he decides to try to invite the son that he's sort of estranged from to come live with him and hopefully build a bond and repair their sort of relationship. This film is called Sakwan Island, I think. I don't know how to pronounce it exactly. But essentially, it starts as sort of just a father-son bonding film, living out in the wilderness, and then sort of grows to be a stronger story about, regrets in lives and what it means to stay together and how you form bonds between people in a family. This is a story that I would recommend. If you don't already know the story, don't Google the book that it's from, because the title of the story is a bit of a spoiler, I guess. But but I found this a really compelling film, and again, this is another one that there's something about father-son relationships that really draw me into narrative stories, and I thought this film was beautiful and tragic. And by the end of this film, again, another film that had me tearing up quite a bit, but still a beautiful story, I thought.
Stephen David Miller, did you check out Sakwan Island by any chance?
I actually did not wind up catching it because of a Letterboxd comment that said something like more like Suck Island and gave it 2 stars. So I really shouldn't put so much credence in the opinion of a random stranger on the internet. I had been really intrigued by the storyline. I think this was slightly longer than a lot of the films of the fest. And one of the unfortunate trade-offs that you make when you are trying to cram as many of these as possible is when the number starts with a 9 in terms of minutes, it is much more compelling than when it starts
Absolutely.
with a 1.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
that is the choice that I definitely made many times.
Yes, this is a very scientific, rigorous process we go through to decide
Yes.
whether to watch a movie. And Stephen, I mean, you haven't even named the phenomenon of movie miracle films whose runtime begins with an 8.
Oh,
And that is
wonderful.
beautiful. That's beautiful.
That is true.
Yeah. All right. So Christopher Schnese was a big fan of Suck One Island. I had not heard great things about this movie either, but I'm glad you enjoyed it. But the man has a taste, and it is tragic stories about fathers and sons who can deny that I'm not here to yuck your yum. You know what I'm saying? All right, Stephen David Miller, hit us up with another film that you'd recommend from Sundance 2025.
All right, I am going to recommend a film called Brides by Nadia Fall. This is a story, one of the many movies where I went in not having read the synopsis. I just saw the thumbnail and thought, this seems like it will be up my alley. The premise is that 2 teenage girls are in search of freedom, friendship, and belonging who run away from their troubled lives with a misguided plan of traveling to Syria. I'm reading that verbatim because I do not want to spoil anything that is not in the direct synopsis of this movie. This belongs in a canon of films that I am very fond of, which I would say are young people making extremely poor life choices, but in a way that I find empathetic. Think about like American Honey, for instance, or I would say to a lesser extent, movies like Eighth Grade, like things where you see a young person and you're like, I know what you're going through. I wish I could tell you that there's a better way. And in this case, it's 2 teenagers who they've been living in England. They are both Muslims. One is from Somalia. The other is, I believe, Syrian, though the film doesn't actually say. And they've been experiencing a lot of anti-Muslim discrimination in England. And they're fed up with it. And so on social media, they've seen Syria as this place where a Muslim can really be who they are. You know, this is it's a respite. It is something where they can join in this fight that is going on. They can be fully themselves. They don't have to hide anymore. And they're both excited about this possibility. And so they set out alone to travel there without telling their parents. And they wind up on a layover in Istanbul, and things do not go according to plan. They wind up just having one unfortunate incident after another happen to them. And through this whole movie, I keep thinking, dear God, what are you doing? Please don't make that decision. But the 2 young leads are so delightful. The banter that they have with each other, the kind of infectious optimism they had, I found it very moving and also unsettling in a good way. Because this thing that Syria represents to them, we as the audience know that it is a much more complicated situation. And perhaps as a young person, things wouldn't be as wonderful as they imagine if they made it there. But we also join in their hope and their optimism. And I found it just a very, very, very interesting movie that gave me a lot to think about. And the 2 actresses at the center are just delightful. So I was really taken by Brides.
Christopher Schnese, did you have a chance to check this movie out?
I did, and I was also a fan of this kind of road trip movie, but has other sort of overtones that are maybe darker than your average road trip film. But yeah, as was said, like the performances of these 2 girls are fantastic, and I really vibed watching them go on this journey. Like Stephen felt, I was constantly going like, okay, come on. You don't have to do this. But I think it was just a joy to see them go. I kind of wish their destination was different, and maybe had different motivations behind it. But I think I enjoyed the journey that they took together while I was on it with them.
Excellent. Well, the movie's Brides, and it was also critically acclaimed, had a lot of buzz coming out of Sundance. I assume you'll be able to see this movie at some point soon. I want to throw a shout out to Predators, which is a documentary about To Catch a Predator, and it uses a lot of archival footage from the sting operations that they conducted from To Catch a Predator, and it's essentially an indictment of the entire enterprise. It's essentially about why To Catch a Predator was bad and the people involved should feel bad. And I thought it was very fascinating because essentially To Catch a Predator combines the voyeurism, Stephen David Miller, that you were talking about earlier, like society's desire to watch the downfall of these schlubby dudes that are trying to have sex with underage children online, and see them humiliated. Like there's a sort of raw desire that people have to watch this depravity and watch these people's lives end. And this movie tries to explore why that is, but it also kind of condemns the entire enterprise. And like its position, I think, is that this was a net negative for society. And I thought it was a kind of a fascinating exploration of this because, if anything, I think our desire to see people publicly humiliated has only increased since To Catch a Predator was on the air. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to say what these people have done in To Catch a Predator is as bad as some of the stuff you see online today, or I'm not trying to compare those things at all. But I think both To Catch a Predator and also the online humiliation rituals we see these days are like come from a similar place of the person did a bad thing and let's see them humiliated and let's see them destroyed, publicly. And this movie Predators asks, is that a good thing? Is that a productive thing? And I thought the answers such as they were pretty fascinating. So I was a fan of this documentary Predators. Stephen David Miller, I think you also saw this as well, right?
I did, yeah. I loved Predators. I'll be honest. One reason I haven't mentioned it is because I was certain someone was going to bring it up already because it is such a just undeniably powerful documentary. I think on the Filmcast, you like to talk about movies that ask the question, but who is the real blank of the title?
Who are the real title of movie? Right?
Exactly.
Yes, and that is the question that you can ask of this movie. It's very pointedly called Predators because it's asking the question, who are the real predators here? Right.
Very much. I mean, this is a doc where just the elevator pitch hooked me. I knew I just wanted to revisit, like, To Catch a Predator. Wasn't that a kind of fucked up series when you think about it? And it's true for the obvious reasons of entrapment. It's true for the voyeuristic reasons. But what I wasn't expecting is how much this film keeps digging deeper and deeper and deeper. I feel like every 20 or 30 minutes, there was a shift in the movie and it had a completely new aspect of the phenomenon to explore. Layer after layer, it brought some meta commentary that I won't try to spoil, but there was a lot of kind of personal investment in the documentary too, and it really shone a light on itself in a way that I just found endlessly fascinating. I think this is just an incredibly well-made documentary that not only explores a very interesting topic, but also is a meditation on what are we all complicit in? What are we doing by watching this documentary or by watching The Perfect Neighbor, for instance? And I think I love a movie that makes you feel conflicted about your own participation in it. And I think this was just really masterfully done.
Schneezy, did you enjoy Predators, the movie, as well, or did you have a chance to check this out?
I did also enjoy it. When Steven did reach out and say, "Hey, if you have room left in your slot, you should check this one out." And I think simply by the name of it and knowing what the subject matter was, I kind of assumed that I had everything that this documentary was going to bring to me. But I didn't really follow To Catch a Predator other than like the memification of it when it was airing originally. And I think that the thing that sort of stands out to this is just that, not just that like this situation is kind of wild, what was going on, but the fact that simply by making a show like this, you push yourself towards like something that is beyond what you're trying to accomplish with it. And that the more successful your show becomes, the more in the direction of maybe not 100% on the up and up you can potentially get. And I think that was, the documentary did bring out more than I kind of expected just going into it.
Yeah. I will say I was a huge follower of To Catch a Predator in the 90s or whenever, it was on Dateline and it was a huge deal. And I remember watching very engrossed in the episodes and then also feeling gross afterwards and feeling like something about the way they're doing this doesn't feel quite right. And this movie, Predators, helped me to process my feelings about that phenomenon, and I really appreciate that. So, anyway, all right, we have a few final movies to share. Christopher Schnese, hit us up with your last rec from the Sundance Film Festival 2025.
So I'm 0 for 2 so far. No, sorry. The first one. Oh no, I guess you were still
Stephen
lukewarm
David
on it.
Miller liked
Yeah,
that
yeah.
one, and
I was a fan.
and we didn't even see Suck One Island, so who knows? Terrible name for a movie, by the way.
Yeah, it is. I hope I'm even pronouncing it correctly.
They don't say the title in the movie, like
they say it, but it's it's French accents. And,
I see. Okay,
yeah, I didn't quite pick it up.
All right.
I'm going to pick another one. This is not my number 3 favorite film, but this is another film that I'm sure nobody else liked. But it was more on the kind of entertainment side as opposed to like the feeling it emotionally. That is a little film. Here we go. Fingers crossed. Called "The Virgin of the Quarry Lake," which is a
Gesundheit. No, I've never heard of this movie. Yeah.
It was in the World Cinema Group, but it's a Spanish language film that is basically about 3 young girls who are sort of infatuated with this guy in their town, and they're all sort of into him. And then one day, an older girl comes, and he sort of gets involved with that girl, and they're all very jealous of it. Well, this is a story about how one reacts to it. I kind of went into this expecting a good coming of age story about a random summer of 3 girls being infatuated over a guy, but this film sort of goes into a little bit of a fantastical realm at times, and I thought that this was a very, very fun and engaging film. I would have liked it with just the exploration of these young women trying to compete for the heart of this young guy, but it adds a lot of strangeness and kind of a fun thing. And this was the 4th day of the festival for me that I watched this, and it kind of just gave me an excitement of watching this girl try to get revenge on people she's jealous of.
Very cool. Sounds cool. Not a movie that I had a chance to get. I do remember this movie now. Like I was looking through it, and interesting choice, Christopher. The Virgin of the Quarry Lake, name of the movie, and worth checking out according to Christopher Schnese. Stephen David Miller, did you check that movie out, or is
that was one that came on my radar fairly late? A few critics were putting it pretty high on their list, but unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to catch it.
All right, Stephen David Miller, hit us up with your last movie to recommend from the Sundance Film Festival.
I'm debating between a little indie or a big one people will be talking about, and I think I will go with the big one. This is a little movie called Twinless, which unfortunately I believe David Chen was
What would have been the other movie? Just out of curiosity.
The other movie would have been East of Wall. I can mention both briefly if we want to.
But go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So the big one, Twinless. This won the Audience Award in the U.S. Dramatic section this year, which tends to be kind of the bellwether for what is the movie that might be the big breakout of the festival. I believe Didi won it last year, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
This is a film by James Sweeney, who also is a co-star in the movie. And it is a look at a twin who their brother was living in Portland and they tragically passed away. And the twin
Their twin brother, to be clear.
Yes.
Twin brother,
yes. Their twin brother tragically passed away, and they go to a twin support group where they meet with other people who have lost their twin. And in the process, this guy, Roman, meets a person named Dennis who also has lost someone, and they form a bond, even though they're very, very different. Roman, played by Dylan O'Brien, is this kind of gruff, sort of a schlubby, I don't want to say a dumb guy, but he clearly has never left his small town in Idaho. He doesn't know a lot about the world. He isn't very well read. He's a fish out of water in Portland. And he really is struggling to understand his gay twin brother who moved to the big city and didn't fully cut him out, but they never quite meshed. Dennis, the person he meets, is another gay man. He's very cynical, very well-read, he's very introverted, and they make an unlikely duo who kind of help each other process the person that they lost. Dylan O'Brien is just incredible in this movie. He plays both twins, the gay twin that passed away, as well as the living twin who is grieving him. And in the process, he manages to show two very, very different characters, both of whom could be seen as caricatures. Like, he's making capital C choices. He's definitely doing things, but it feels very honest and authentic. It never feels over the top. And I was really blown away by his performance. I will say, kind of like Omaha, this movie goes places, and I can't agree with every place it goes. I don't want to elaborate more, except there's a little bit of Dear Evan Hansen syndrome where I kind of dislike a character so much that it threatens to boot me off from having empathy. But in the end, the acting won me out, the comedy, the good-naturedness. And look, as a person who has a queer twin living in Portland, this movie was kind of tailor-made for me. So I think it just really hit me in a hard place. And I was glad I managed to catch it.
So the guy pretends he was friends with someone who offed themselves. Is kind of what you're saying?
I am not going into that much detail.
And they all sing their feelings. Okay. Anyway, so you also mentioned East of Wall. Let's just talk about that because that'll make us an even 10. We can make this a top 10 list.
Absolutely.
East of Wall is a movie I saw and I also quite enjoyed, and it's essentially like this year's The Rider, like this year's Chloe Zhao's The Rider. It's a movie about this woman Tabitha who has a horse ranch, and she also takes in teenagers just to raise them because they're from troubled families, broken homes, and it's based off of this true story. Apparently, the filmmaker found this person by accident and decided to make a movie about them. So it's this kind of hybrid docudrama, as it were. And I thought it was also another quintessentially Sundance movie, like in a good way. Tabitha, I think, is an incredible screen presence. Kind of just this person who, whenever they're on screen, they're really compelling, and they're not an actor, right, as far as we know. And there's some really spectacular horse scenes in this movie, just some great horse cinematography that I thought was great. So anyway, really lovely, beautiful film, East of Wall. Stephen David Miller, what were your thoughts on this movie?
I echo yours, including the comparison to The Rider. I mean, this is the kind of movie that is just my bread and butter at a festival like Sundance. Stripped down, mostly non-professional actors, except one or two familiar faces. Jennifer Ely and Scoot McNairy show up to kind of bring a little bit more dramatic gravitas. But like you said, Tabitha is just captivating whenever she's on screen. And she's the kind of person that if you invented her in a drama, if someone in Hollywood wrote it, it would feel very inauthentic and awkward and just wouldn't land. And you, even without knowing anything about the film, you can tell these are real people who are playing 90% themselves. And I am just a sucker for that. I found this very emotional and beautiful and just a good close-up look at a very specific community in the Badlands and the things that they go through to get by.
East of Wall won the Audience Award for the next selection at the Sundance Film Festival this year, so I do assume you will have the opportunity to see that movie as well. All right. I will mention one last movie to round out our 10 favorite films of the Sundance Film Festival, Zodiac Killer Project. And I talked a little bit about this on the Filmcast recently, but essentially there is this guy named, I think Christopher Shackleton, right, is the name of the filmmaker. And he is a master, or sorry, Charlie Shackleton, I apologize. He is a master of what I would describe as spite-based filmmaking. He made a movie called Paint Drying, which is designed to highlight inequality in the British film classification system. And now he's made this movie called Zodiac Killer Project, which is titled such because he had the rights to make a movie about the hunt for the Zodiac Killer and then lost the rights because it was based off this book. And then he decided to make a movie about what the movie would have been that he would have made. And in doing so, it becomes a deconstruction of the true crime genre. And I think it's very clever and very insightful and also occasionally very irritating because Charlie Shackleton is narrating the whole film himself, and he's very pleased with himself. You know, you can tell he's very pleased with himself that he's, what a clever concept that I've landed on. And so that is kind of annoying, but at the same time, he's right. You know, like he is accurate that this is an extremely clever concept, and I appreciated it. Christopher Schnese, did you watch this movie, Zodiac Killer Project, by any chance?
I did watch it.
What'd you think?
I might want to pause on what I thought of it until we get to the next section of this episode.
Okay. Well, Stephen David Miller, I think you were also a fan of this one, right?
Yes, I was a fan of this movie. Like you said, it is a bit too self-satisfied, and that made me dock it maybe a half star in my esteem. But it's just calling it shot. It is kind of like Penn and Teller, where they tell you exactly how the trick works,
Right.
and yet it works anyway. He is painstakingly telling you these are the tropes I'm engaging in. This is how the music will swell. This is what we cut to. And yet I found myself wrapped up in this story that he is telling me he would have told me. This is basically the if I filmed it. This is him saying, if I had made a movie, this is what it would look like. And just as an expression, as an experiment, I think it is incredibly successful.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I do find his self-satisfied tone a little bit grating, and occasionally he calls a shot, and then I feel like he does not actually succeed in that shot. He doesn't manipulate me the way he tells me the footage will manipulate me. But overall, I found it just a really fun and interesting thing to watch. And I do want to point out that all three of your movies are sort of variations on Americans' obsession with crime and getting to understand the heart of a killer and what are the manipulative aspects of that.
Yes, indeed. But I really appreciated Zodiac Killer Project because it helps you understand, the ways in which you are manipulated. The ways in which these true crime documentaries use the same techniques to get their claws into you. So anyway, huge fan of the doc. It also won an award. It's very polarizing. It's a very polarizing film, as we're about to discuss in a few seconds. So, Christopher Stacey, let's talk about what we're going to do is we're going to each share one film that disappointed us. We're not going to focus too much on the disappointments, but hey, we might as well, because we saw so many movies. We'll talk about one movie that disappointed us. Stacey, what'd you think?
Yeah, so as I teased, my biggest disappointment was the Zodiac Killer Project. That film is doing everything you guys are saying. And my thought watching the film was, I get it. But
this could have been an email.
I still have 90 minutes left to watch of your 92-minute documentary. And it was just
could have been
one of
a
those,
text message.
100% could have been. And I do appreciate the care and craft that went into it. It's like one of those things where you're like, everything you're saying, I get. I see what you did. I have 20 more films to watch, and I want to get to the end of this one.
You're wasting my time, Zodiac Killer Project. You're wasting my time.
Like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay. Zodiac Killer Project is Christopher Stacey's biggest disappointment. Stephen David Miller, I don't even know what you've chosen for this. Like, what's your big disappointment for Sundance?
I could have gone in so many directions because there were so many movies that tried to be zany that I just hated. I would call them next core, which is a thing that happens at Sundance. But I don't want to punch down at a little guy, someone who's seeking distribution. I want to punch the champion, something who won the grand jury prize for drama at Sundance.
Wow.
And that is a film called Atropia.
What?
This movie, if we define disappointment as the gap between what I wanted from the film and what it delivered, this hands down had the biggest gap. I was so sold on the movie from the premise, which I discovered 3 minutes into watching it. It's set in a fake town called Atropia, which is in the California-Nevada desert. It is meant to simulate Iraq, and it is a place that U.S. Army personnel, this is set in 2006, I think. A lot of movies, by the way, were set in the Bush years. I'm not sure why this year that happened. But anyway, people who are getting ready to be deployed to Iraq go to this town where actors are being paid to pretend to be in some cases terrorists, in other cases just random townspeople, and they simulate different situations that they would probably see while they were abroad. Amazing. Perfect recipe for a satire. Should have been a home run. Alia Shawkat stars in this movie. Tim Heidecker plays a large role in it. I'm in. I love it. What follows for the next 90 minutes or so, I found painfully unfunny. I feel like this movie sacrifices the premise of let's make fun of the U.S. military industrial complex and the jingoism surrounding that, and instead becomes just a very particular story about Alia Shawkat's character and the relationship she forms with someone else. And it isn't a relationship that I found to be symbolic of anything they're satirizing. It is just the most boring possible story they could tell from this. I found it to have painfully unfunny jokes. There is an extended repeat gag about someone who can only get turned on when they smell poop. This is in the movie that won, again, the grand jury prize at Sundance. Gags just go on and on and on until they're just beating a dead horse. I just found this shockingly unfunny and uninteresting. And I didn't hate this movie. Like, if this had been a movie I discovered that no one had heard of before, I would be like, 2.5 stars, not gonna shit on it too much, but wasn't my thing. But the fact that this won the top prize just made me very confused and angry, and I feel like it is such a squandered premise. I don't know if either of you were able to catch this film.
Was not able to catch it, but I've heard great things. So I'm very curious to hear what I'm going to say about it once I see the movie. But I'm sorry you did not enjoy Atropia, which was a huge favorite at the 2025 Sundance Film Festival. All right. I'll close this out. I watched a movie called Serious People. And, the way you described to Stephen David Miller of the difference between what you expect and what it delivered, massive in this case. This movie had the best premise of any movie that I saw at Sundance. The idea is that there's this music video director who is super busy, and he's about to become a father, and he and his wife are both music video directors. She's pregnant, super pregnant, and he's so busy, and his mental health and his physical health are falling apart. So he hires someone to be his double and kind of do a bunch of work for him. While they, because he's been asked to direct a Drake music video. And the music video project is happening at the same time as he's having a child. And so, amazing premise. It's like, wow, what a delightful premise that's going to satirize an industry, music videos and music, that's ripe for satirization, ripe. And unfortunately, the movie is an absolute chore to sit through. It is like the scenes play out in these long, continuous shots that are like wide-angle shots, and it is stylistically completely unengaging, which is shocking because these are music video directors. Like, they're the people that know the most how to grab your attention, and probably I think they were like, oh, we can't. Like, this is a serious Sundance movie. We can't use all the tricks of the trade to get you to pay attention. But I think they go so far in the opposite direction that the movie, for me, was a near total failure. And that's very unfortunate. Because, again, like, Drake is, is a major figure in the film. Like, it's very topical. And sadly, did not enjoy Serious People. Either of you have a chance to watch this movie?
I did. I will say that I think what could have saved that film is just more challengers. If there was more challengers in the film, that would have saved it. I'm quoting the film in case you didn't.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I completely blanked it from my memory. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it sounds like you were also not a fan then.
This is also on my short list for disappointment.
Yeah.
But I thought the Zodiac Killer Project would have been a more interesting conversation. But yeah, nothing about that film worked for me.
Yeah. Very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. All right. Well, those are our 10 favorite films from the Sundance Film Festival. I am very grateful for Christopher Schnese and Stephen David Miller's time today. Thank you guys so much for chatting with me. If you enjoy their work, obviously, check out the Spoiler Warning podcast. Thanks, guys, for chatting today. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
They're Christopher Schnese and Stephen David Miller. I'm David Chen. See you later.